What are the aims of tonight? Our aims are addressing the assumption of Christians can't do real science, exploring the evidence of the medical and historical impact of Christian scientists, and identifying causes that allowed Christian scientists to excel professionally. Some activities that I have planned for you, and I hope we get into as the talk we currently do, which is then followed by a case-based discussion. So I would like to ask you to listen very attentively, because our discussion is probably going to revolve around the cases presented. The outcomes, what is in for you tonight? What can you hope to gain from this evening? You will be able to address common misconceptions about professing Christians in science and medicine, and you will learn how to apply their causes for succeeding professionally to your own life. First of all, I would like to address the assumption: Christians cannot do real science, which appears to me to be nothing more than a myth. And Aldous Huxley's indictment, most of one's life is one prolonged effort to prevent thinking, seems frightfully true. And who are these three scientists that are depicted on the chart? Any suggestions? Just call out the names. Simson in the middle, yeah. Any other thoughts? Maxwell, yes. Who's Maxwell?
Which one of those two would be?
Maxwell, on the bottom right is Joseph Lister, and Maxwell is on the top left. Very good. I would like to start off with James Clerk Maxwell, who was born in 1831 in 14 India Street in Edinburgh, and to the father of a fairly wealthy advocate, John Clerk Maxwell and Francis. And all indications suggest that Maxwell had maintained, and throughout his early childhood, an unquenchable desire to find out things. One of his most famous statements his father can remember when he was 3 years old is Maxwell was asking him continuously, "How does this thing work? Dad, can you show me how things work?" And at this early age of Maxwell's life, his father wrote a letter to his sister-in-law and described the sense of inquisitiveness. For his father said, "He is a very happy man, and show me how it works is never out of his mouth. He also investigates the hidden course of streams and bell wires, the way water goes from the pond through the well." These were early signs of Maxwell's maybe budding scientific career, which started here in Edinburgh, at Edinburgh University. And he entered Edinburgh University at the age of 16 to start mathematics. People who are excellent in mathematics always highly impressed me, so I'm very much impressed by Maxwell. And he finished his studies at the age of 19, just 3 years later. And then with the age of 19, he became a fellow of Trinity College in Cambridge. And he spent 4 years in Cambridge. And moving swiftly on, at the age of already 25, he then accepted a professorship at Aberdeen University. And there he dedicated himself to the application of mathematics in physics. I was really astonished how young he was when he became a professor. It's quite amazing, aged 25. His most significant achievement at that time was the development of the classical electromagnetic theory, synthesizing all previous unrelated observations, experiments and equations of electricity, magnetism, and even optics into one consistent theory. Does anyone know for what Maxwell is very famous for what outstanding achievement in the realm of physics? Any thoughts? Yeah? Yes, very good. Yeah. Yeah. Came very close. Yeah, this all sort of is summarized in Maxwell's equations, which demonstrated that electricity, magnetism, and even light are all manifestations of the same phenomenon, the electromagnetic field. And Maxwell's work in electromagnetism has been called the second greatest unification in physics after the first one carried out by Isaac Newton. And Maxwell's research significantly influenced today's X-ray, CT, and MRI technology, which then had its effect in medicine. Einstein's opinion of Maxwell's scientific significance is rather interesting. He himself described Maxwell's work as the most profound and most fruitful that physics has experienced since the time of Newton. Einstein kept a photograph of Maxwell on his study wall alongside with a photograph of Faraday, Michael Faraday, and Isaac Newton. What do we know about Maxwell's faith? Ivan Tolstoy, author of one of Maxwell's biography, remarked, "At the frequency of which contemporary authors omitted the subject of Maxwell's Christian faith while writing short biographies about Maxwell." Maxwell was attending both Presbyterian and Episcopalian services as a child, and at the age of 22 he underwent an evangelical conversion. In a letter to Reverend Taylor, he wrote of his personal spiritual situation as follows: "I have the capacity of being more wicked than any example that man could set before me, and that if I escape, it is only by God's grace." He not only understood his own sinfulness, but also was aware of the solution. In another letter he wrote to one of his relatives, he observed the preaching of a Reverend Lewis and commented in the following: "Lewis preached on 'You must be born again,' showing how much he and all the world and ourselves needed to be born from above. Then he described the changes on a man newborn and his state and privileges. I think he has got a good hold of the people and will do them good and great good." To summarize Maxwell, his life, his personality, I sort of would describe him, and these are some personal observations I picked out, but he seemed to be relentless inquisitive. There was no stopping for him to explore and to find out. He never stopped learning, and he kept on discovering and exploring. The next person I would like to talk about is Joseph Lister. He came from a very prosperous Quaker home in Upton, Essex. And why do I link the medal of the Nobel Peace Prize with Joseph Lister's background as a Quaker? Are there any ideas what the connection may be? I found this quite another interesting fact of history, that the Quakers were awarded the Nobel Peace Prize in 1947 for their efforts in promoting peace. The Quakers, as they are commonly known, are also known as the Religious Society of Friends. Lister's scientific career, he initially started to study arts at the age of until the age of 25, but then he felt that he made a wrong decision and embarked on studying medicine, and finished with a bachelor's of medicine and entered the Royal College of Surgeons. In 1854, Lister became first assistant to and friend of surgeon James Syme at the University of Edinburgh. In Scotland and in Edinburgh Hospital, where Lister worked, at that time almost half of the patients who underwent surgery died. So 50% of patients died, and this seems obviously quite high to us, but various mortality rates in hospitals at that time in Europe after surgery went up to 80%. So people were really not looking forward to get into hospital or go into hospital for operations at that time. Neither do they today, but I think the conditions were quite grim. What did Lister do to change that? He simply made surgeons wear clean gloves and wash their hands before and after operations with 5% carbolic acid solution, which is also called phenol. And phenol is the structure there on the right-hand side. After 6 years, he earned a professorship of surgery at the University of Glasgow. Now, at that age, Lister was 31 and became a professor at the University of Glasgow. And he again started to promote the idea of sterile surgery. And phenol had been in use as a means of deodorizing sewage, so Lister tested the results of spraying instruments, the surgical incisions, and dressings with a solution of phenol. And Lister found that swabbed on wounds, phenol markedly reduced incidences of gangrene, and subsequently published a series of articles in the Lancet in 1861. Lister then moved from Scotland to King's College Hospital in London and became the second man in England to operate on a brain tumor. He also invented wiry operations in order to repair kneecaps with metal wire, and improved the technique of breast operations. So he was very, very innovative. Lister was president of the Royal Society between 1895 and 1900. And eventually in 1924, the Lister Memorial Fund was used to establish the Lister Medal, which became the most and is still the most prestigious prize that can be awarded to a surgeon. What about Lister's faith? Still keeping in mind that we are addressing the assumption that Christians cannot do real science. Lister said to himself that I am a believer in the fundamental doctrines of Christianity. In summary, regarding Lister, he came across to me as a man who had a great quiet consistency in the pursuit of his passion. He was not deterred. He was going to find out, and he was going to succeed. And he did this with a solidness, a determination that I find very remarkable. Last but not least, James Young Simson was born in 1811, and he was born in Bathgate in West Lothian as the youngest of 8 children. He entered Edinburgh University when he was first 14 years old, and Simson completed his medical examination at the age of 18. But he was so young that he had to wait 2 years before he got his license to practice medicine. Isn't it great what potential these 3 guys had so far? Simson's scientific career is represented in part by these 2 figures. Obviously towards the left we have Queen Victoria. Can anyone imagine what this structure may be there towards the right? Any suggestions? Well done. Well educated. And how did this relate to Queen Victoria?
She used it.
Uh-huh. Yes, he was the first one who initially used chloroform on himself. He experimented with a dosage of chloroform that put him to sleep but didn't kill him. Now this potentially could have happened because they weren't familiar with, the dosage at that time. And if the experiment would have turned out fatal, chloroform probably would have been considered as something dangerous, of a dangerous substance. He also, at that time, while chloroform became more acceptable as an anesthetic for childbirth, when Queen Victoria used this during the birth of Prince Leopold, he experienced a lot of resistance, particularly from traditional, also religious folks who was arguing for the point that childbirth had to be painful. And Simpson, some would disagree. And Simpson was a free thinker, so he was very hospitable. He had lots of people in his home in Edinburgh. He liked to discuss and debate things, and he took an example out of the Bible in order to contradict this argument that childbirth, labor had to be painful, and went back to the story when Eve was taken out of Adam's side and God put Adam to sleep, and so caused a rather painless operation in this way. And I thought about this probably was the first general anesthesia ever recorded. So yeah. And about Simpson's faith, he came across to me as someone who had a very lively faith. A reporter once asked Simpson to name his greatest discovery. The newsman, no doubt, to be given an example from anesthesia, obstetrics, or services to the Queen. Simpson's unexpected reply was, "When I found I was a sinner and that Jesus Christ was my Savior." Simpson was also an elder in St. Columba's Free Church here in the Royal Mile, and he founded and led the medical dispensary for the poor in the Royal Mile in a Christian mission that is now another church. When I was thinking about Simpson's summary, he came across to me as a courageous, free-thinking doctor who didn't mind the opposition of men. He took it as something that just came with the territory. But he was so passionate and somehow so lively about his profession that this faded more and more in his background. In conclusion, my first conclusion is that professing Christians were and are some of the finest medical professionals and scientists. I think that is quite evident just going through the life histories, biographies, and scientific achievements of Maxwell, Simpson, and Lister. A second conclusion I got out of studying their cases, their history, was that a relentless inquisitiveness, a passionate consistency, and courageous exploration will influence society. And the third one is that James Clerk Maxwell, Joseph Lister, and James Young Simson seem to have had a central life focus, their faith in Jesus Christ. And with that, I thank you very much, and we may have some questions. Yeah, I think with all three of them, they had periods where they were quite discouraged. And their faith seemed to me, it was not only an anchor or a reference point, a framework that guided their life, but actually a very strong source of encouragement just to continue. Simpson and Lister had actually some conflicts here while Lister was in Glasgow, Simpson was in Edinburgh. And there were some conflicts going on about the validity of aseptic surgery. And as we probably all familiar today, we are in various scenarios of conflicts. This may be personal ones, this may be professional ones, this may be spiritual ones. And it seemed to me that their faith in Jesus Christ, not just in a theoretical way, but also in a personal relationship, gave them the continuous impetus and the drive to move forward despite of what was going on around them. Yeah, I would then define the term Christian. What does it mean to be a Christian? And so I probably would ask the person who said, "Oh, everyone was a Christian," would ask them, what do you understand being a Christian is? And they may come up with, a religious definition. The Christian believes in the Bible or what have you not. But I think the outstanding criteria of Simpson's, Lister's, and Maxwell's life was that they not only had a mental knowledge about what Christianity meant to them, but they also had a heart relationship with a person they described, as Jesus, and they believed in him as the Son of God with all the ramifications. And I would focus on that relationship and how that relationship then would work out in my life. What are the effects of that relationship? Sometimes we can get quite in theoretical arguments with people, but and I bring a quote actually right now from Ravi Zacharias that relates to that. The single greatest obstacle to the impact of the gospel has not been its inability to provide answers, but the failure on our part to live it out. And I think that is really true, because people get so much information and we can deliver information to them, but actually they want to see evidence. How does this work out in my life? How does God help me in my life practically? And if I can show them, explain to them, tell them a story, witness to them what were defining moments in my life when I experienced God. When I was sick, He healed me. When I was needed help, some circumstances changed that are hard to explain just naturally, and a situation resolved. So I think, out of my experience, that people then are quite open, because it removes all that theorizing and all that mental framework, and they have something concrete to look at. No, I think it already happened, particularly with Maxwell. When Tolstoy was writing a biography on his life, he was commenting that there is really a poverty of evidence, written evidence of the Christian witness that Maxwell demonstrated and had. And he was an outspoken Christian, as I sort of explained early on. He made it very clear, but I think then as well as now, it doesn't to be very popular to be a Christian, and consequently, I would say the media as well as other sources employ a form of information management that leaves these things out of the loop. Yeah. No, he just a free thinker. What I mean with that is that he did not carry a cognitive bias towards initially any new thought or new approach to things. Free thinker, I think, has a negative connotation in the sense that it is maybe sort of associated with Freemasons or any kind of background that would oppose outspoken what we define evangelical Christianity. When I use the term free thinker, I mean a person who is really open to explore new things, to think about new approaches, like the example I mentioned of when he was using the Genesis scripture in order to justify biblically why it would be okay to use chloroform for childbirth. That didn't fit in the mold of a certain people group at that time. And he had the liberty just to think about, how things could work differently. So I would use the freedom to think and to explore mentally in a positive sense, not in a negative sense. I think in one way there may be, it's probably a religious facade or a religious way that did not appeal to the secular world was taken as a justification that this religious, narrow-minded thinking represents all of Christianity. So in the sense of that Christians are reactionary or opposed to genuine progress. And the logical consequence out of that would be, as they are, they cannot do real science. That may be one strand of thinking. The other strand of thinking is maybe, how can anyone produce scientific, valid and excellent results if he or she believes in something as unprovable as the existence of a God or the record of the Bible? So for people this didn't make logical sense. So how could these people who believe that kind of stuff, be excellent scientists? And for me, being a medical doctor, being a scientist and being a Christian isn't a contradiction. I think they go very well together. In actual fact, for me it is a huge encouragement to excel, to be excellent, to have values of integrity, to treat patients honorably, respectfully. Obviously this would be values for any other person as well, but I can see an example in my faith, Jesus, that encourages me to live that way. And if people, I don't devalue any other forms of working as a scientist. I'm not pontificating what anyone should think. But what I explained tonight is my own personal opinions as a doctor, as well as the evidence I can see from the scriptures. And maybe because people had negative experiences in the past with religious groups, they were just short-circuiting their thinking and saying Christians can't do real science. And thus the initial quote of Aldous Huxley, it is really an indictment that we have lost maybe our ability to think through today. And tonight this was a challenge for people who may not be familiar with Christian values, on the grounds of these three cases presented, to think through, is this really true? And as I said, I don't think it's true. Christians are some of the best and finest scientists. I could, yes. The reason why I picked these three examples is because they all were related to Edinburgh. And if I could pick three of these prominent scientists who came out of your city, how many more are around if I just go through the centuries or other places? I find this remarkable that Edinburgh has such a huge potential and has such a rich heritage of Christian thinking, Christian science, Christian medicine, and I believe it's going to be restored and resurrected again. Because what has been sown here won't fall flat. It's going to bear fruit, and there are people dedicated to excellence in science, excellence in God's kingdom, in His work, and I'm confident that Edinburgh hasn't seen her best day yet. Her best days are to come.